As Israel's killing of Palestinian civilians continues, a UN expert calls the ongoing genocide in Gaza a collective crime sustained by the complicity of influential states.
There has been a general tolerance and negligence toward Israel's misbehaviors, and so Israel has festered in the climate of impunity that has been facilitated, all the more as it was transitioning from an unlawful occupation into a genocidal one.
UN Special Rapporteur Francesca Albanese tells us why she won't be deterred from doing her job and why she stands firmly on the side of justice. Hello, I'm Ghida Fakhry. On today's program, we speak with one of the most vocal critics of Israel's genocide in Gaza. Since May 2022, she has used her mandate as an independent UN human rights expert to highlight Israel's grave violations of international law in the occupied Palestinian territories. Francesca Albanese, an international lawyer specializing in human rights and the Middle East, recently accused 63 governments of being complicit in Israel's war on Gaza. In her latest report, published in October 2025, she called out the multilateral system for, quote, decades of moral and political failure in a colonial world order sustained by a global system of complicity. In a previous report, she accused dozens of major corporations, including Microsoft and Amazon, of profiteering from Israel's ongoing military occupation. The backlash was swift. The US government imposed sanctions on Albanese, with Secretary of State Marco Rubio accusing the UN Special Rapporteur of, quote, anti-Semitism, support for terrorism, and open contempt for the United States, Israel, and the West. So, what does all this reveal about the global human rights system and the world's unwillingness to confront its own complicity? We're joined by UN Special Rapporteur on the situation of human rights in the Palestinian territory occupied since 1967, Francesca Albanese. Francesca Albanese, let me start by asking you about the current situation in Gaza. Despite a ceasefire, Palestinian civilians continue to be killed. The siege remains largely in place. Has the so-called Gaza peace plan made any significant difference to the Palestinian population?
Yes, the ceasefire has made a difference for the Gaza population. The carpet bombing has stopped. People are not talking anymore as they used to do, of genocide yes, genocide no in Gaza. It seems that the political landscape has changed in a way that there is no need to talk about the genocide in Gaza. These are the things that have changed. The rest is as horrific as it was. There are, just in the first month since the declaration of a ceasefire, over 230 Palestinians have been killed, including there was one day in which Israel killed 100 Palestinians, and among whom 50 children.
So was this part of the plan to shift the conversation?
I think so. I think so. But think that half of Gaza remains under Israeli occupation. The peace plan that the so-called Trump-Blair peace plan that is being concocted in Washington or London is in fact a betrayal of international law, because we know that for real peace to come, we need to have a modicum of justice for the Palestinians, and Palestine belongs to the Palestinian. The destiny of Palestine should be in Palestinian hands, which is something neither Israel nor the United States and the other acolytes are ready to absolve. So they continue to control Gaza and to set conditions for Gaza, while Gaza remains strangled, together with the rest of the occupied Palestinian territory.
You've condemned this plan as unlawful, immoral, and irresponsible. In fact, you and other human rights scholars say that it imposes a colonial trusteeship that strips Palestinians of their inherent right to self-rule. Is that the main violation?
Yes, it violates the right of self-determination of the Palestinians. I'm really shocked and at loss of words. It's a plan where the focus is on the commercial business economic parts of the administration of the Palestinian territory. Here we are focusing on Gaza. So there is an emphasis on the reconstruction and the demilitarization, the de-radicalization of Gaza, not mentioning any need to de-radicalize or demilitarize the state that has sustained, that continues to sustain the genocide, calling for the ethnic cleansing of what remains of Palestine, and has meanwhile attacked six countries in the region other than the Palestinian people, you know. So it puts a burden on the Palestinians as if they really were the country, the independent sovereign country rather than people under occupation. It's incredible how little attention there is for Palestinian life and suffering. And it adds insult to injury after over 2 years of documented genocide, which will not stop. I mean, I'm afraid that eventually the so-called peace plan will achieve what the genocide has failed to, meaning the ethnic cleansing of Gaza. Israel will continue to displace as many Palestinians as possible from Gaza to remote destinations, and in fact, the Palestinians have no choice.
And it's done in plain sight and with complete impunity. It is done with the implicit, if not explicit, support of so many powerful UN member states. In fact, in your last report, you name many governments, including the US, the UK, Germany, Canada, Australia, and others, those who present themselves usually as global defenders of human rights.
I often say that it's not international law that it has been stabbed. It's the multilateral system that has completely failed. International law is very clear. International law, had it been applied, would have prevented and immediately stopped and punished the crimes, war crimes, crimes against humanity, and the acts of genocides that have been committed in Gaza. But even before getting here, there have been nearly 60 years of tolerance of Israel building colonies, which are war crimes in occupied territory, forcibly displacing the Palestinians, recurring to extrajudicial killings as a matter of policy, the so-called shoot to kill policy in use in the Israeli army. So there has been a general tolerance and negligence toward Israel's misbehaviors. And so Israel has festered in the climate of impunity that has been facilitated, all the more as it was transitioning from an unlawful occupation into a genocidal one, a regime of apartheid into a destructive one.
But how do you explain this level of tolerance when IDF soldiers themselves have been confessing to the fact that they have been shooting, killing civilians at will, and given the authority to do so?
As I analyzed it in my last report, which calls Gaza a collective, the genocide in Gaza a collective crime, made of several, this complicity is made of several elements. There is the diplomatic support, political support, economic, commercial, financial, then the military support, and also the tolerance of the weaponization of aid, and so the turning of the humanitarian system upside down. But so, in a nutshell, I do think that member states have the behavior they have for 3 reasons. Some of them is fully complicit. So some of them are ideologically aligned with what Israel is doing to the Palestinians as part of a larger design. I think this is the situation of the United States, and some other states were really close, ideologically close to this design of having the US and Israel's and their ideology dominating in the Middle East. And so the Palestinians continue to be a thorn on the side, not just of Israel, but of a system that doesn't tolerate resistance. This is why I do think that the certain Arab states are totally fine with what Israel is doing. So a lot of it is ideological, but there is also some strong financial economic interest connected to this, as there are companies and private entities from banks, pension funds, to businesses, arms producers, etc., profiting from Israel's illegal activities. And then there is a third component of states who do not have the capacity, who see how wrong it is, but do not have the capacity to stand on their own. And among those, there are countries like South Africa, Namibia, Senegal, Colombia, who are trying, like the Hague Group members, who are trying to stop this pattern. In Europe, you have Slovenia and Spain who try to do things differently, but they need to really advance a new form of multilateralism, in my view, to succeed.
Some are willing to stick their necks out, like some of the countries that you just mentioned, but many others, including in the global south, are fearful. And there's also, as you mentioned, the entanglement of interest between member states and major corporations with the occupation and with the ongoing genocide. How do you undo this?
Yeah, you undo this by doing the right, you undo it by undoing it. So what is needed is that states must cease their complicity. So I understand that it's difficult for one state only. For example, South Africa and Colombia are clear examples where the leadership wants to do things differently. And still, while taking Israel to the International Court of Justice, South Africa is still one of the countries which is transferring the highest quantity of coal, and so Colombia to Israel. So there are contradictions that are connected to the fact that even member states sometimes are not fully in charge of the decisions they take, and there are economic interests that are even more powerful than people's decision-making power. However, I think it comes with a unity among countries. This is why I so much value the Hague Group, is by creating another kind of partnership that the strength comes. And I often make the example of the mafia that was so rooted in the part of the world south of Italy I come from. This mentality of silencing people, dividing people, fragmenting them, and threatening them one by one wins only if there is disunity among the people and there is silence. While you start calling out the kind of intimidation tactics that, like the United States right now, he's using, and Israel, he's using by manipulating the concept, for example, the plague of anti-Semitism. Everyone who criticizes Israel is accused of anti-Semitism, being a supporter of terrorism, or being a member of Hamas. These are the arguments, and the US has other arguments, the tariffs, etc. These are intimidation techniques that remind me of the mafia.
And it works, and it still works in many cases, perhaps less than before.
It doesn't work anymore. It does until it doesn't work anymore. It does until member states get united and say, "Halas, now it's time for us to stop cooperating with you until you respect international law. You cannot bomb us all. You cannot kill us all. You cannot fire us all." It applies to states and individuals. So states must disengage. Companies must divest. Otherwise, they should face populars, like consumers' choices, ethical choices, but also justice. There are many cases in which lawyers organizations are taking companies to court, and then citizens, ordinary citizens in the Arab world, in the Western world, everywhere, must stop buying products and services connected to the illegality of the occupation, the apartheid, and the genocide.
You talk about the need for unity. There is a mechanism at the United Nations General Assembly called Uniting for Peace. It was established back in the 1950s to be used when the UN Security Council blocks urgent action. Why isn't it being used in this case?
The General Assembly holds a lot of power, which is not using because there is no unity. On the one hand, the bullying tactics that the United States and others are using have had an impact. Also, I think it's more difficult to mobilize the people because over the past 20 years, there has been a spreading of Christian Zionism in places like in Africa, in Asia, in Latin America. I mean, when I was in Australia and I met with human rights defenders who would stand in solidarity with Palestine from the Pacific Islands, and they would say here, protests and demonstrations and any forms of critique toward Israel, whenever we asked governments to be more vocal, we are repressed. And I say, how come? Christian Zionists.
But whether it's driven by ideology, by Zionism or not, whether it's simply driven by economic and political interests, how do you respond to states that continue to defend their support for Israel's actions on the basis that they are supporting Israel's right to defend itself?
They are unforgivable because they are destroying brick by brick the very foundation of the system, that's the multilateral system that was set up to prevent the utmost brutalities of genocide, crimes against humanity, and to secure peace and stability. And this system has benefited mostly Western countries. So they are the ones who should be more jealous of this. But I think that this is where the change is starting, the positive. I mean, this is the silver lining, that people in the West, despite the manipulation, the control of the narratives and how much has been done to dehumanize the Palestinians, they have seen this genocide has entered ordinary people's life.
But could any of these governments realistically face legal consequences, whether through the ICJ or domestic courts? Is that even remotely realistic?
It is remote, but it's not unrealistic. In the sense that in order to have that shift, you need to create the popular movement. Look at Mamdani. I mean, the victory of Mamdani as a mayor of New York is the evidence. It's that change can happen if sustained by the people and by values. I mean, look at how interesting. 2 years ago, it's students who have started the protest. It's started by the flotilla, including in Europe. I keep on saying, excuse me, have you seen students from the UK, Austria, Germany, France, Italy? The students are the ones who have started the protest against the genocide, because for them, genocide is a memory in the making. It's what has happened in Gaza is real, and it has shocked them. And this is an incredible moment of opportunities to tap into.
A lot of people are also growing increasingly tired of the narrative that they have been fed for so many years through the media. You have taken on governments and corporations that you've accused of complicity in the genocide in Gaza. What about the role of the media? Should there be an independent inquiry into media complicity, similar to Rwanda, where journalists were convicted for incitement to genocide?
Absolutely, yes. And I would love to see a request put forward either by South Africa or any other of the intervening parties, intervening states in the proceedings, or any other new one, asking the court to also evaluate the role of the media, particularly, not exclusively, but particularly corporate media in Western countries.
Do you believe that Western media coverage of Gaza has crossed that line from bias to complicity?
Look, I do. Complicity is a very clear legal concept, and I think that it should be treated with care and therefore assessed. What I can tell you is that they have acted so unprofessionally, so unethically, because somewhat many of them have contributed to fabricate a consensus around the legitimacy of Israel's actions in Gaza by amplifying, for example, the colonial tropes that Israel used, that they were all savages, that they were all responsible, that they were barbarians, even aggravating the crimes that had been committed against Israeli civilians. They were brutal.
And of course, this has often been referred to as a conflict, as a war, not as a genocide, as you argue. But let me ask you as well about the state of free speech.
Let me say on this one, it's very important, because look at what the media have done. the media, Western media, whatever have been interviewed and used the word genocide in the interview, I would say, yeah, but Israel, the answer is systematically across the border from Australia, the UK, France, Germany, Italy. The answer was, yeah, but Israel disputes this, right? Yes, of course. You accuse a criminal to commit crimes and the criminal will not tell you, yes, it's right, until, it doesn't matter what the criminal says. Have we ever asked Putin about the crimes the Russian army has been committing in Ukraine? This would be okay to ask him, but why not to trust independent observers, including UN experts? The fact that even UN experts and the Commission of Inquiry have been treated like lacking any integrity, lacking impartiality and objectivity is very serious.
And this year alone, several EU institutions in The Hague, in Berlin, in Munich, in Bern, cancelled your appearances, citing security risks. What does it say about Europe's commitment to free speech and international law?
The anti-Palestinian crusade in Europe is pathetic because, again, it speaks to the free speech and academic freedom, useful only if convenient to those in power.
What do these actions say about the way criticism of Israel is policed globally?
Again, it speaks to the ideology of governments in power. It speaks to the fact that they cave into pressure primarily for financial, economic interests. Either it is ideology or it's profit, it doesn't matter. It's despicable anyway. And it's really the annihilation of the core values that constitute the pillars of the so-called liberal democracies.
And you have faced fierce pressure and criticism, and of course, US sanctions as well. How have these pressures, how have these sanctions affected your work and your ability to carry out your mandate?
Well, the sanctions have been really outlandish. It's such an incredible wrong for the United Nations system. And why have I been sanctioned? Because allegedly because of cooperating with the International Criminal Court, which is part of my mandate, which is eventually what matters. They attack my persona, they attack my family, they threaten me, they make me feel insecure, they cut my economic and financial channels because as it stands, I cannot open a bank account, I cannot be paid, I cannot make payments. So of course it's unfortunate, but again,
are you surprised that the Secretary General didn't do much, didn't say anything in support of you?
I prefer not to comment, but I'm very disappointed by member states who have the power and the responsibility to correct it and have not taken steps. And this is intolerable because the chilling effect that it will create on other independent experts, on other commissions of inquiries. Look, even Palestinian human rights organizations have been sanctioned.
You have said that you come from a region in Italy that is known for the mafia, yet you never imagined that in 2025 you would face mafia-style threats at home in the middle of the night. It sounds frightening. What has it been like, and what keeps you going?
I have seen an intensification of the threats. And in the beginning, they were very scary, and they continue to be scary. But at a certain point, it's not the fear that disappears. It's something that has stepped in for me and the rest of my family. It's how much space you leave to fear to control your thoughts and your actions. And I know that we live somewhat on borrowed time, and I'm not talking of me individually. We are really misusing all resources we have in this planet. This goes beyond Palestine. And now that the mask has fallen, it's clear that the system of power will continue to grow harsher and fiercer. And it's time for people to really make good sense of their democracies, if they still mean something, like spaces, collective spaces where everyone can enjoy the same freedoms and the same rights. And we are not going in that direction. This is why I think that I personally tend not to be controlled by fear yet.
Are you optimistic that justice will eventually be delivered?
No. And this is why I fight so on an everyday basis for justice to be delivered, because I don't think it will happen without a robust, sustained, popular, and hopefully non-violent struggle.
Francesca Albanese, UN Special Rapporteur, thank you so much for being with us.
Thank you.
As Francesca Albanese reminds us, genocide is never the crime of one nation alone. It is the failure of an entire system to act in the face of egregious violations of international law. Just as genocide is never just about one people, it's a test of the world's humanity and its willingness to confront its silence and complicity. Albanese's findings expose a brutal truth. The genocide in Gaza was sustained by an international order that looked away, excused, enabled, and profited from it. If justice means anything, it cannot stop at those who pull the trigger or drop the bombs. It needs to reach those who supply the weapons and those who block accountability. Francesca Albanese stands as a reminder that courage still matters and that words can challenge power. Perhaps that's why she is feared and why her voice and the cause she defends will not be silenced. That's all from me, Ghida Fakhry, and the entire team. Thanks for watching.